Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Centre for Legal Innovation's Legal Techy Tuesday series. We are very excited to have Jim Chiang, founder and CEO from My Legal Einstein, here with us today. Jim will demonstrate My Legal Einstein's AI-powered legal contract review tech that allows lawyers to register and analyse legal contracts in less than 5 minutes. Again, welcome. Fabulous to have you all here. And now over to Jim.
Thank you very much, Christine. And also a call out to Terry as well as the rest of the Center for Legal Innovation for actually having me and inviting me here. I think you guys actually do some really great work in terms of actually kind of helping law firms actually kind of modernize. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, and I want to make this as interactive as possible. So let me tell you a little bit about who I actually am and what I'm trying to accomplish as part of this as part of this presentation. First of all, one of the things that I want to first come out with is that my background is not from the legal field. So as you can actually see, my background is the AI for video streaming side. And I think it was about 10 years ago, I was actually doing work on the streaming of programs like Game of Thrones and things like World Cup. And video streaming was actually still in its infancy. So I actually had a chance to see huge amounts of data, lots of media engagement behaviors. And I one day dream of being part of the Game of Thrones cast, but that unfortunately never came to be. But I guess my little Photoshop there would be amusing for you as well. So after doing a lot of work on AI for video streaming, one of the things I actually was looking for is really impactful problems that is a great way to apply artificial intelligence. And the place that I actually ended up looking at was basically the AI for legal space, specifically related to legal contracts. And I actually ended up heading up the AI engineering for two of the large CLM companies out there, one of which is Icertis, and then also with Aptus, who actually recently got acquired by Congo as well. So I've actually been in the space probably for the past 5 years or so. And I actually want to kind of talk a little bit about My Legal Einstein and who My Legal Einstein is. Now, as part of this talk, I don't want to make this look like an infomercial about who My Legal Einstein is and et cetera. I don't want to make this as a commercial. I actually want to make this a talk about what the realities are related to artificial intelligence, because that's something that people talk about all the time. And there actually is a lot of misinformation out there. And then some of the aspects about how My Legal Einstein thinks about AI and how it actually thinks about helping attorneys. So there's two things that people actually know My Legal Einstein for. We actually launched it roughly around the beginning of the year or so. And we already announced a partnership with the American Bar Association here in the US to help educate attorneys about modern law practice, about how to adopt legal AI, specifically in the legal contract review process. And I think that there's a huge appetite. There's a lot of work that we are planning with the American Bar Association to help in terms of CLE programs, in terms of educating attorneys about how best to leverage all this technology and in what important ways. The other aspect that people actually know us for is that we recently launched a GDPR compliant site, .eu, that actually supports not only English contracts, but also contracts in the different languages that's specific for the European market. That includes French, German, Italian, Spanish. And we are also planning for release of Asian language in probably the next few months or so. So it's actually a very important technological advance to be able to support legal AI in different languages. And I'll show you that as part of the demonstration as well. So let's talk a little bit and fairly broadly about the business problem we're actually looking to solve. So this actually relates to legal contract collaboration. Okay, so what actually happens when you receive a legal contract review? So in a typical scenario here, you might be in-house counsel, you receive a contract that is being negotiated from a third party. You did not originate the contract, obviously. And there are things you might want to address as part of this legal contract review process, which includes things like improving contract compliance, leveraging best practices. You actually might have playbooks in-house. Being able to actually collaborate with the stakeholders in the company, for example, finance, maybe outside counsel actually works closely with you, as well as other teams from a business side of things. All keeping this in mind that as you ramp up, as you scale this process, you need to basically kind of keep in mind that you actually want to keep and maintain processes that allow you to consistently and efficiently and like from a time management standpoint, be efficient in terms of how quickly you can actually negotiate a contract to completion, as well as the repeatability and scale aspects. So that's kind of the big overview of what business problem we're actually looking to solve. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence in general. So one of the things that's so attractive about AI is that everybody loves to talk about this because the media and all the way back to what 1920s and 1968 and such, people have actually been talking about how AI, computer technology in general, has actually been so advanced that it creates these intelligent droids that live among us, and we love these movies and these stories about how things work. And a lot of times, this has actually seeped into the public perspective about what artificial intelligence for so long that it's hard to actually differentiate it. And we love these movies as well, but at the same time, one of the things we actually want to focus on is really trying to understand, at least at the basic level, what is artificial intelligence and why it actually matters. So let me tell you a little bit about why I'm talking to you about AI today. First of all, AI has been around in academic centers since the 1950s. It actually was kind of conceptualized at that time in the academic books. But honestly, that was all, for the most part, mostly irrelevant. And the reason why is because up until very, very recently, and actually in 2012, in a University of Toronto, there was a group of grad students who actually decided to use a combination of very complex deep models married with very, very large scale computing resources, as well as big data, to solve a very unique problem about image recognition for whether you see a cheetah in the picture, whether you see a bullet train in the picture, and things. It was actually an academic contest. And what they found was that by using these combination of these three factors, they're actually able to have a model that was created that was state of the art, literally have the error rates associated with identifying what's actually in pictures. And this actually started effectively the modern AI era. And so all of a sudden, even though it's actually been in academic circles for many, many years, nobody really paid attention until 2012. And then since that, and since this past 10 years, the pace of AI research has been so incredibly fast that literally the algorithms and the state of the art technology changes every 6 months. And it's so fast that it's a lot of times we spend a lot of time in the academic areas where we're looking at papers and looking at what's possible as well. So let's talk very, very simply about what artificial intelligence is. So I'm showing here what a neuron actually looks like. So these are the kind of the building blocks of how the brain processes information. The dendrite actually takes in information, and then actually as part of this, it decides whether it actually needs to fire. This neuron actually needs to fire, which then connects to the rest of the brain in terms of what it actually needs to do. Now, that's actually one neuron, okay, one biological element. And the way that this inspiration is used is that when we looking at things like artificial intelligence and neural networks is effectively a simulation of these neurons, a very, very simplistic simulation of two neurons. And part of the reason why is because we still at the very infancy about understanding what is possible and what is how the brain actually ends up functioning. And it's still a huge mystery in a whole range of ways. So we actually are starting to simulate neural networks in this way. And there's many other complicated ways to actually address these types of networks as well. But this is actually the basis of how modern AI actually works. Now, just to go back, and always people are actually talking about how the human brain actually compares with artificial intelligence. AlexNet, the one that actually won that computation, was about 650,000 neurons. Okay, and probably the newer neural nets actually a little bit more neurons than that. The human brain, by comparison, is approximately 10 to 11 neurons. Okay, now that's an approximation. So just in terms of raw computing power, one of the things that probably makes humans much more confident is that for the most part, if you actually just kind of do some simplistic mathematics, the human brain is approximately at least 100 times more capable than a computer AI system. And that's actually a pretty good, strong statement about the fact that, for a lot of things, AI works quite well. However, for the most part, the human brain and the ability for especially attorneys to actually interpret this information is far superior than artificial intelligence. So I bring this slide up, and it provides mostly comfort to attorneys when they actually hear about these stories of how AI is going to come and take over the world and effectively replace all the attorneys out there. That's not even close to being the case, at least not today. And we don't know what the future holds, but it's not anytime in the near future. Now, that said, one of the main reasons for this talk is that we're talking about how AI addresses this barrier of natural language processing, which provides a lot of functionality to the attorneys, okay, that actually allows them to actually augment how they actually understand the space. So that there's a lot of practical applications for AI in the legal field. However, obviously, AI is not going to take over people's jobs anytime too soon. Okay. So with that, what I want to do is I'd like to go launch into a poll of the simple question about how people actually understand artificial intelligence. So I'm going to launch this poll, and I'm going to give people maybe about 30 seconds or so to answer this. Right? I don't want to take too long, but what you're going to see is that it's a simple question. Would you trust artificial intelligence to make decisions for you regarding contract negotiations? So according to the poll results, what you see is that in answer to the question, would you trust artificial intelligence to make decisions for you regarding contract negotiations? 40% said yes, 60% said maybe, and curiously, 0% said no, which probably indicates that the people who actually showed up to this conference actually are the ones that kind of are a little bit more accepting of artificial intelligence as a tool. A lot of times when I actually bring this poll up to a more general audience, there's a lot of people who actually say no. Okay. And I think that even in this audience, you actually say 60% actually says maybe, which is probably pretty fair. Okay. So let's talk a little bit, and I'm going to talk more about the technology at this point. So let me talk a little bit about how we think of AI at My Legal Einstein. First of all, we talked about the ability for humans, for attorneys to actually understand legal language is far superior than how AI can actually be able to do it, even with the state-of-the-art artificial intelligence aspects. So we do not expect that the AI should replace the attorney, nor should the AI try to practice like they're actually an attorney. So one of the things that we simply do not do is that we do not expect the AI to tell the attorney what to do next. It really is important that the attorney actually takes the step to actually analyze the available information and figure out what to do next. The second point about how AI works in My Legal Einstein is that we are going to demonstrate practically an immediate time to value with legal AI. And I think that I'm not sure how many people on this call are vendors per se, but there's actually a number of companies who actually introduce solutions. And one of the things that is always been perplexing is that if you require things like an extensive implementation cycle, large numbers of customizations, then you realize that the adoption rate is very, very slow. Okay, and the reason why is because attorneys need to actually be able to answer things quickly. Okay, and to be able to react to kind of the problems that they see immediately. So part of the big value behind by Legal Einstein is the time to value should be under 1 hour for legal AI. The ability to actually register, log in, and process a contract and get value from My Legal Einstein should actually happen all within 1 hour. Okay? And it's actually a critical point for all technology for the legal space. And then the third point is how we think about AI in terms of augmenting human intelligence. And I'll talk a little bit about, and it becomes very clear in terms of the product demonstration for how we actually support multiple languages, as well as how we actually do document comparisons. So let me jump into a demonstration. And here is My Legal Einstein. So we actually have, this is our standard website. And people actually, as they learn about My Legal Einstein, they actually go to our website, and then they see that they can actually just go register for a free 30-day trial. They actually also see there's a new EU GDPR site as well. So for the European users, they can actually go register through that site as well. So they can actually go educate themselves, etc. So it's so simple as basically saying, I going to register, enter some information in, register, and then basically authenticate your email. And with that, you can actually go and log in. So I'm going to log in as one of my test accounts. And as this presentation is actually going, I'm going to demonstrate some of the capabilities for the artificial intelligence aspect and how we think about it. But before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick off the processing of a real contract. So I think I have about 10 different demo contracts here. I'm going to pick one. And as it's processing, we support both docx as well as PDF formats. As it's processing, I'm going to explain how the interface actually works. So what you see in front of you is basically two side-by-side panels. And the design of this interface is kind of geared towards and it's also optimized for the review and comparison of legal text. And let me tell you why that matters. So when you're actually reviewing a third-party contract, one of the critical ways of how you evaluate that third-party contract is comparing it to other documents. And these other panels on the right, you can actually then load those particular types of documents. And I'll go through an complete scenario of that. Up on top, you see minus and plus here. And if you click on plus, it allows you to go see multiple side-by-side panels. So you actually see I'm on a laptop screen, and you can actually see 4 side-by-side panels. And on a larger screen, and many attorneys actually have much larger screens to actually view their documents, they can actually see up to 6 in one browser environment. And that's actually a huge thing, especially when you're talking about reviewing multiple playbooks, multiple amendments to an MSA, or things along those lines. You actually want to be able to access them side by side as well. The reason why this interface is like this is that a lot of times we have actually engineered this so that it looks a lot like a computing interface. And that's actually intentional because when you're looking at contracts that refer to other text in other documents, it's very close to what a computing interface actually looks like. And we've designed it that way in particular. Now let's talk about the artificial intelligence aspect. So in this contract, I think it's doc 4 or such, I think it's about a 50-page contract. What it actually is it's in docx format, but we also support PDF formats as well. So with PDF, you actually can upload the contract and actually extract the text, but we also go through the OCR process as well to kind of interpret what characters is in the contract. And in addition to that, we also support English, French, German, Spanish, and Italian, etc. Those types of languages. So when you can actually upload it, it actually does the same thing for those languages as well. Now, the AI piece is where we have a lot of our technology focused on, and I think it's almost complete. So I think I'll give another minute or so as it's finishing, is that we have effectively retrained our understanding of words to be specifically related to words in the legal contract setting. So you can kind of imagine an English word can actually have multiple meanings. But what we have done is we actually have made it so that we know what types of meaning they actually have in the legal contract so that we can actually interpret it more accurately in the legal contract setting. So let me go do a quick save here. We'll just save this as doc, we'll call doc 4 test browser or something of that sort. Let's save this as such. And the AI algorithms, what it does is it actually goes through each of the paragraphs associated with text, and it determines a number of things. It determines the primary legal topic in each paragraph, as well as the secondary legal topics in the paragraph. So as an example, you can actually see these labels. It has none, introduction, heading, preamble, etc. These are all system-generated, AI-generated labels associated with that contract. Specifically for the first primary topic associated with that paragraph. And it goes through the entire contract to actually label it that way. And once you're actually able to index it this way, what's most immediately useful is the ability to navigate this contract based on the topics. So as an example, you can actually look at this contract and basically say, well, what is the governing law? So you click on that and basically see it's one paragraph's governing law is the state of Maryland. You can actually go look at, for example, what the termination conditions are. And it basically says effective about 30 days written notice, right? So you can actually see this information, instantly access it. In addition to that, you can also go and look at a specific topic that's spread out through the entire contract. So this is actually a construction project contract. So you see indemnification in various paragraphs throughout the entire text. And being able to see that all in one place is also very, very useful. So that's actually how we actually allow you to navigate it. Now, one of the most important features, and I can tell you this feature is the one that most My Legal Einstein users currently use the product for, which is basically the ability to deep dive on a specific topic. So here's a great example. Let's say we're looking at payments. So payments is basically it's paragraph 51, paragraph 54, paragraph 58, section 6.1, 6.5, sections 8.1, etc. Right. So that's usually roughly in the middle of the contract itself. But this contract a lot of times has a lot of financial information, financial obligations, and things along those lines. And when you're going through the legal review process, one of the things that every attorney, when they actually finish reviewing that contract, they always wonder about is whether they actually missed any specific language in the contract. So as you can imagine, the attorney is actually consulting with the client constantly. The client might say that they're actually interested in, they're concerned about risk for certain types of project completion costs and things along those lines. And it's a concerning topic to figure out whether you might have missed something in the contract itself. And because that could actually potentially lead on to litigation and also damage reputations and things along those lines. So what we enable companies to do and attorneys to do is be able to deep dive on a specific topic. So as an example, if you click on this plus a couple times, what it effectively is doing is it allows you to see the payment topic, but allows you to widen the lens of all the other things that's kind of related to payments. And effectively, what it allows an attorney to do is basically do a deep dive on a specific topic. And that's very valuable because of the fact that there's a lot of embedded language in most contracts that is on subsections of different clauses that may or may not be very well labeled or so. And that's actually quite typical. So as an example, you can see paragraph 15, which is actually in this contract. This is actually a open source contract that we use for demonstration purposes. Dates back to, I think, 20 years ago or so. And what you see is you can see subcontractors paying to pay for all necessary construction. So these are different types of payment obligations, pay for all utility charges, etc. And when an attorney is actually trying to do the review, this is the type of language that typically gets missed through the cracks. And the reason why is because when you're doing a text search, a lot of times this information doesn't show up. Here, we're actually able to understand each of the topics as well as the secondary topics. So if you click on the justice sensitivity, we show the attorney the different types of drill downs so that you can actually surface this language so you can actually do these reviews. And I can tell you, once attorneys actually see the language that they might have missed, they become, they quickly become users of the system because it actually allows them to help double check their work, which is quite valuable. Other aspects, for example, you can actually go and look at the zero paragraphs related to taxes. And it could be the attorney says that's perfectly okay with this in this particular contract itself. From the AI perspective, we're really just providing that information to the attorney. The attorney is the one who is the more sophisticated attorney. We're not giving them a recommendation. We're not telling them what to do next. We're just providing that information. And it's really up to the attorney to interpret whether it's necessary to include a new taxes section or not. So that's actually how we think about AI. And that's actually specifically for one contract. So now I'm going to move on to the next stage, which is the rest of the product demonstration. And a very common scenario is when you're actually reviewing third-party contracts, you typically want to compare it against your own contract. So for example, let's go bring up one of your own contracts. And I think I have this loaded up with a whole range of different types of contracts. So I'm not sure they're actually necessarily related to each other, but we'll kind of go through the example here. So here is one, maybe it's your own contract document. And you might want to also open up a playbook. And that playbook might give you some special instructions about what to look for in a contract of this type. Or you can actually pull up something out of the archives. And the archives are actually very useful because it stores all of the contracts you've negotiated in the past. And you might actually have seen that you might want to be able to pull up some language that you did in a previous contract. And maybe it's actually applicable in this contract as well. So it allows you to do that. So here you actually have 4 panels, okay, each loaded up with different types of legal contracts. And here you see some of the red lines that actually were implemented before. And each one you can actually navigate independently. So for example, you can actually go into this one and basically look at indemnification or something like that. So each one are independently navigable by topics. Or the more magical things happens when you actually basically turn on these topic syncing capabilities. So by clicking on that, it tells each of those panels to listen for the topic changes in the other panels. So as an example, if you change the panel here to look at termination conditions, everything on the screen all of a sudden becomes termination language. And for the most part, this is actually the magical view that most attorneys really want to have, right? Because they're really doing it today, but the way they're actually doing it is usually through Microsoft Word, through text searches within each panel. So to access each of these documents, they go click open the Microsoft Word version, they search through that specific document to find the right language, and then they try to figure out how to best copy and paste between the different documents. Here, the reason why this is actually quite valuable is because you're looking at the third-party contract, you're comparing it to your own contract to figure out whether it's materially different, and you can actually say, yes, it actually is materially different. You have the playbook right in front of you, so you can tell what are the rules associated with how to change the contract, as well as some standard language that you can actually then use as well. And here is also some other red lines that you actually implemented in the past that you might want to implement in the specific contract on the left. So at this point, the attorney has all the information they really typically need right at their fingertips to be able to make this red line as appropriate as they choose to. So the purpose for this conversation, let's just kind of use the standard language, and we'll just copy and we'll just make a red line. And here, you actually go paste this in there, and you're gonna basically say, let's just edit it in simple ways, and usually you have to edit to refer to the specific contract at hand, etc. And then basically make the red line, and here you have it. Okay. So that's actually how we think about in terms of red lines. But the key capability here is that you're actually able to compare documents across the board and be able to find the right types of language to actually implement in the red lines itself. Now, in addition to that, one of the things I actually wanted to show you from before is the ability to process multiple languages. So let's turn this off for a little bit and let's reload these things with contracts in different languages and show what that looks like. So let's go open one that's in Spanish, for example, and let's basically open one here that's in, I think I have a German version as well. Okay. And this is a ways to, as an attorney, who actually, my Spanish and my German is so elementary that it's not useful in this context. However, it allows attorneys to actually understand language across different types of contracts, because one of the things that's quite special about My Legal Einstein is that our AI algorithms work across all these different languages. And part of how we actually are able to do that is basically implementing a language translation that actually works well for legal contracts in the different languages themselves. So as an example, you can actually go and peek at the underlying English translations. For example, it's not perfect, but for example, you can actually see this is actually in Spanish. And if you actually want to peek at what the underlying English is, you can actually click on this thing, and it actually turns into an English representation of what that paragraph is. And it gives you enough of a sense to figure out whether you actually need to reach out to an outside counsel, for example, who actually has a native capability in that specific language to figure out whether you need to have a more extensive review, or if it's actually mostly boilerplate language. So it actually allows you to at least get some sentiment associated with what this contract is about. So it's actually kind of useful that way, as well as the fact that from a standpoint of being able to process our contracts and actually understand the topics, each of the different languages also natively allows us to isolate the topics in each of the different languages themselves. Okay. Another use case is you actually might want to load different types of legislation, different types of codes that are specific to a specific geography, and you should also be able to load it into these document panels as well. All of which to actually kind of speed the review of contract documents and such. So that's kind of the AI piece, right? The AI piece is really related to how we actually able to deep dive on specific topics in contracts, how we're actually able to understand things across different contract documents by topic, and also the machine translation aspects, all of which are very practical applications of artificial intelligence in the legal review process. Okay, and all kind of put into this interface that allows you to view and compare text. Now, one of the things I actually want to also mention is a couple of other features, and I'm also going to talk about the collaboration and the negotiation aspects associated with this contract as well. So, a couple of things. So, one of the things we're actually able to do is set up these things called alerts. And this alert capability allows you, in this example, you actually have setting up an alert. You name the alert, and you name the specific type of alert logic, which basically means this says, I want to send the payments and the taxes topics to Brenda, or who happens to be the part of the finance team. So as soon as you start the collaboration on the contract, it automatically sends a alert email, and this is actually an example of what that email looks like. It's sent from My Legal Einstein, and it actually extracts all of the appropriate topics within that specific contract and automatically sends it to the finance team. So I think that one of the things that this actually solves is the entire collaboration model associated with how an in-house counsel receives contract paper and then collaborates effectively and proactively with different parts of the organization. And this is something that the attorney currently does by doing extracts and copying and pasting and searches through Word to copy to email and then send that out to different groups. But the fact that you can actually do it automatically really means that they are always part of the collaboration process for this particular contract type. So you set it up once and it continues to work that way. Some other things, we also have the idea of the document types. So the default models that we actually have, this is actually already geared towards anybody who actually signs up for My Legal Einstein. So this is a list of 30 different topics that are universally searched across all different types of contracts. But the question is, what if it doesn't always fit very well with your specific type of legal contract? And what that allows us to do is you can actually then define document types. And these document types allow people to basically extend the base model specifically for your specific types of contracts. And this is actually built in within My Legal Einstein. So you actually define this new document type. And by doing so, you can then create new clause labels. And so you can actually define that for auto procurement contracts, you might want to track what the parts quality delivery SLA paragraphs are in the specific contract. And as you define this new document type, once the AI model actually sees enough of document examples of that document type, it actually retrains itself based on the user input. So it actually is able to learn based on user input to create a new AI model that's specific for your instance. And that actually allows you to automatically make the AI faster and more intelligent as it actually learns based on your inputs. Now, one of the things we are absolutely adamant about is that from a security standpoint, none of this data is shared with anyone else who does not have access to that document type. So that specific AI model, specific to that document type, is owned by that specific person who actually owns that document type. So we kind of keep that IP specific for that user. Okay? And it's not shared unless the user actually chooses to share it. Okay. So anyway, I have basically maybe another few minutes, and I actually want to kind of briefly go through this one topic. And I'll go through it pretty decently quickly. That's related to the collaboration and negotiation of this contract. So let's go back to this original one here. So traditionally, what we have is a scenario where when you negotiate a contract, you're passing redline Word documents back and forth and negotiating based on Word versions and things along those lines. What we are actually able to do is because we actually have this interface, we can actually also have the collaboration and negotiation happen concurrently, all on one platform. And just so you can actually go and execute the entire contract from the beginning to the end and maybe send it out for DocuSign or electronic signatures all on the same platform. And I'm going to demonstrate how that works as well. So I'll try to cut it as quickly as I can. Here's the collaboration. I'm going to turn on collaboration. I'm going to turn on negotiation. And I'm going to add a collaborator. And the collaborator will be named Sally at mylegaleinstein.com. And I'm also going to add a negotiator. And the negotiator will be named Nancy at mylegaleinstein.com. Yeah, these are both test accounts. Now, the reason why I put this out there is because when we think about collaboration negotiation, what we're actually enabled to do is basically for one contract, be able to segment the views so that the collaboration happens on a more complete view. The negotiation with counterparty, they only see the parts of the contract that they should see. They should see. And the way to think about this is these circular indicators are things that are for internal collaboration only, and the square ones are for external collaboration. So let me walk you through a scenario. So let's say I go into Sally's view, and this is actually Sally's view. I'm going to open up that specific document that we just looked at, which I think is doc test 1000. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a comment. This is an internal comment. So this is a John Sally here. This is a comment essentially. And I'm going to propose a change. And maybe I'm reviewing this and I say, let's go review this and make this a very simple change. And I will replace this thing with a very short sentence, and then maybe mark this particular thing as something that needs review. Okay, and that's quickly done there. Now I can actually go back to John's view, and here's John's view. And if I go look at all paragraphs, what you're going to see is it's a completely synchronous view of what is in the contract. So you see Sally's comments as they actually, so there's no need to refresh it in any way. So everybody's actually looking at the same contract. Now, the nice thing about this is that then John can actually look at the changes that are proposed by Sally, who's one of the collaborators, and John can actually approve or reject them. Now, in this case, I'm basically going to approve it. It may basically say that the language that Sally proposed is actually reasonable, it's considered a contract. You approve it. And as soon as you do that, what's different here is that it automatically gets promoted to the counterparty. So something that John has actually approved in the contract automatically gets proposed to the counterparty. So we actually have a third browser here, and this is Nancy's view. So let me go log on as Nancy. And when you look at Nancy's view, you can then open up the document. You can see the changes that were proposed. And Nancy's actually acting as the counterparty in this instance. So the only views that she has is of the square ones, which basically includes comments as well as proposed document edits. And here, what Nancy can actually do is Nancy can go look at the proposed changes to the contract and approve or reject them. And let's say we're just going to approve it here. And this basically allows it to turn this change to green. And you can also see it also changes to green on this side, which means it's a finalized thing with the counterparty. And in addition to that, you can actually go look at the entire, actually this is not for you, but let's go back here. This is the document log associated with the entire contract. And what you see is the complete narration of everything that actually happens in this contract. And the reason why this is actually important is that when you avoid the sending of documents back and forth, and you see who is proposing a red line, who is approving the red line, whether the counterparty has also approved the red line or not. It becomes a very detailed view of what actually happens to this contract. So you can actually look at this and say, okay, John opened the document, added the document edit, changed the collaboration settings and negotiation settings, added collaborators and negotiators, and then Sally also opened the document. We showed that, added comment, added document edit, added tag. Then John actually approved the document edit, and then Nancy, who's the counterparty, actually then does her actions. So you see a complete audit of all the actions that actually were done in this contract. And so this is actually just collaboration negotiation model kind of works very nicely with the entire AI system as well, when you're talking about being able to compare documents and also now being able to negotiate the contracts as well. So all this is really intended to kind of speed the interactions that all companies have with the counterparties and the collaboration, so that people can actually get to the point of reviewing the contracts faster, using artificial intelligence, as well as having an interface that allows you to efficiently negotiate with the counterparty as well. So I guess with that, I kind of want to end this presentation, and I want to get a little bit more into the discussion phase. Hopefully this is not too commercial in terms of demonstration, but I just want to kind of go through that as well. So at this point, one of the things I actually wanted to do is I wanted to go start the polling for the second question. And it's really about, like, in terms of the adoption for how we think about artificial intelligence, okay? And it's a very, very broad question. I'll just launch a poll and basically kind of have you guys answer it. Do you believe that AI can help you in the practice of law? And this is actually a very, very generic question. So I've launched a poll. I'll kind of give you guys 30 seconds to actually answer it. And then I think with that, I'll go talk up a little bit more about the polls as well. And then we'll kind of turn it back to Christine to kind of have a kind of Q&A period. So part of the Q&A, I want to make this as interactive as possible. Like any types of questions you actually have. I glanced over a lot of topics, like specifically related to the artificial intelligence aspects, because it's a very, very deep topic. And I also I'll show you my my contact information as well. You can actually always feel free to send me a question about the AI aspects, some of the AI concerns, some of the AI claims out there. Be happy to answer any of those questions as well, and then we'll kind of go from there. So I'm going to end the poll now. I think that the poll actually suggests that do you believe that AI can help you in the practice of law? And I'll share the results. I think 80% of respondents actually says yes, which is actually pretty good sign. And then one stays at maybe. So that's actually pretty good. So I think with that, maybe it makes sense for me to turn it over to Christine, and I'll share with you the last of the slide here that kind of contains my contact information. Okay. So
thanks, Jim. That was a great presentation. So we do have one question here that says, could you use this product to compare pleadings? So for example, in a pleadings matrix, comparing the statement of the claim with the corresponding paragraphs in the defense.
I'll tell you this. Because I'm not an attorney, I'm not sure I actually understand exactly the business meaning associated with like the pleading as well as the comparison. But from the standpoint of the product, as long as you're actually able to define the topic in different ways, so you can actually go and pick out the appropriate information from that specific contract or specific legal document, you can still compare it side by side, right? And that's kind of how, when I actually was demonstrating the document type, when you create the document type, you can actually then change the label specifically for your type of document, and then use this product to actually do the comparisons that way.
Great, thank you for that. So if anybody else has any questions, please pop them in the Q&A bubbles at the bottom, and Jim can address them while he's here. So it was really interesting to see how the My Legal Einstein platform allows lawyers to execute contracts faster, review third-party contracts with more compliance, and efficiently collaborate in the document redline process, even when they are in different languages. So if there aren't any further questions, we will draw to a close. If anyone has any questions for Jim after the session, he can be contacted on the details on the screen there. A huge thank you to all of you who have attended today. As you know, the Centre for Legal Innovation is very much focused on these types of webinars, this type of information sharing, collaboration, and experience exchange. We are all about practical solutions. There will be many more webinars coming up in the Legal Techy Tuesday series, so don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook for announcements. We look forward to welcoming you back to one of our events, and thank you again very much for joining us today. Thanks, Jim. Bye.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, everyone.